The guy I've secretly loved for years, my childhood best friend, got into a car accident and lost his memory. When he woke up, he asked me what we were to each other. In a moment of insanity, I lied and told him we were boyfriends. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. Not only was he suddenly all over me with the PDA, but he was also incredibly thoughtful and protective. But the better he treated me, the guiltier I felt. Until one day, the guilt finally peaked. I mustered up my courage, ready to confess the truth even if it meant he'd cut me out of his life forever. But just then, I accidentally learned something from his doctor. Chase actually recovered his memory the day after the accident. You're saying we're dating? Looking at the confused expression on Chase's face in the hospital bed, I let out an awkward laugh and braced myself to answer. Yeah. We've been together for almost 5 years. Chase frowned slightly, staring at my face for a long time. But I have absolutely no memory of you. How can you prove it? I felt a little guilty, but on the surface, I feigned a look of wounded grievance. Humph, you seriously don't believe me? If you don't believe me, just unlock your phone. The wallpaper is a photo of us. He fished out his phone, tapped it open, and sure enough, there it was. It was the last photo I had shamelessly begged him to take with me at the airport before he went abroad for grad school. I never thought it would come in handy like this. In the photo, my face took up most of the screen. My eyes were a bit misty, and my finger was poking Chase's cheek. Back then, to humor me, Chase had actually cooperated and made a face. I wasn't actually happy with that photo, especially because my eyes looked red from crying. I had wanted to delete it and retake it, but the guy not only mocked me for being a crybaby, he turned around and set it as his wallpaper. And he'd kept it there for 3 years. Chase stared at the wallpaper for a long time, his eyes scanning it intensely as if trying to find traces of Photoshop. I got impatient, snatched the phone from him, and unlocked it. I quickly opened his gallery and shoved the screen in front of his face. Chase's frown deepened, because aside from a few random landscape shots and screenshots of documents, the rest were all photos of me or photos of the two of us. Chase's intense frown shifted into an expression of pure shock. He pointed back and forth between himself and me in disbelief. Me? With you? 2 guys? I added fuel to the fire. You didn't seem to mind that we were both guys when you were pinning me down and begging for a kiss. He fell into deep thought. After struggling internally for a long while, he reverted to his usual cautious self and asked me several private questions about him. I answered every single one fluently. He was completely out of options. He didn't say another word, just lay flat on the bed from morning till night, processing it all day. I, however, was thrilled. After all, we were joined at the hip since we were kids. I could guarantee that no one in the world knew him better than I did. When Chase got into the accident this morning, the hospital immediately called his emergency contact. Me. I rushed to the hospital, crying my eyes out the whole way. Luckily, Chase has 9 lives. The doctor said that aside from some external injuries, he only had a minor concussion. It wasn't serious, but whether there would be any aftereffects, we had to wait for him to wake up to know. Who knew that when Chase woke up, he'd be perfectly fine, except for the fact that he had forgotten me. It was like he had plucked me right out of his life. I was furious. So when he asked about our relationship, I lied. I cried and told him he was a heartless jerk for forgetting his own boyfriend. Actually, I didn't say that just to mess with him. I had my own selfish reasons. I had been secretly in love with him for 5 whole years. But from what I had observed, he was severely homophobic. Back in our senior year of high school, the class monitor next door was outed when his diary went missing. One time, I just happened to go to his birthday party and drank a couple of sips of beer. Chase showed up with a dark expression and dragged me home. Seeing how serious he looked, I thought he was mad about the drinking. So I weakly argued, I'm 18 now. Chase's brow didn't unfurrow. He just suddenly said, don't hang out with weird people. I didn't understand. Later, I accidentally saw a male classmate run up to our dorm room with a love letter to confess to Chase. Chase looked indifferent and rejected him point blank. Although he didn't say much, I saw the disgust and aversion in his eyes. That look felt like a cold thorn piercing my heart, chilling me to the bone instantly. I finally understood what Chase meant by weird people. But he didn't know that I was that kind of person too. If he knew that the first time I had that kind of dream, it was his face I saw, We probably wouldn't even be able to be friends anymore. My youthful crush was wild and reckless, but to stay by his side, I forced myself to bury it deep. Now, because I got greedy for a moment of happiness, I deceived him. I don't know if this is right or wrong. I hope you can give me a little time to adjust. Chase's voice suddenly cut through the air, snapping me out of my daze. I looked up, a bit confused. What? Chase looked straight at me and said, word for word, even though we are a couple, I have no memory of our past. Under these circumstances, our interactions might feel a bit awkward. So, instead of forcing it, why don't we take it slow and try to rebuild our feelings for each other? Hearing him say that, I thought I was dreaming. Wasn't this exactly what I wanted? Maybe I could use this chance to actually make him fall in love with me. I cleared my throat, forcefully suppressing the frantic beating of my heart. Then I pretended to stroke my chin in deep thought, acting like I was compromising. Fine. Since you put it that way, let's do it your way. I thought Chase's idea of taking it slow meant waiting a few days. I didn't expect that the very next afternoon, just as I finished work and walked out of the school gates, I'd see Chase's car parked right there. I expertly opened the passenger door and asked in surprise, "What are you doing here?" I had been lecturing until my mouth was dry, so my voice was a bit raspy. I didn't pay much attention to it, but Chase grabbed a bottle of water from the console and handed it to me before answering. "I wanted to take you on a date." My heart skipped a beat, and my eyes widened. Chase really is Chase, his execution is God tier. Yesterday he said we should adapt slowly. Today he seamlessly switched into boyfriend mode. I took a drink of water and asked, "So, where are we going?" Chase looked calm as ever, but two words popped out of his mouth. "A hotel." I didn't have time to swallow. I choked on the water. Isn't this progress a little too fast? Chase gently patted my back and chuckled softly. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm just going back to the hotel to change clothes." I let out a sigh of relief. "Okay, that's good." My ears turned red, and I stubbornly insisted I hadn't been thinking anything weird. Chase suddenly seemed to remember something, his tone turning teasing. "But speaking of which, since we're a couple, we must have done plenty of intimate things. You were so nervous just now. Did you remember something we used to do in hotels?" The way he stopped mid-sentence was incredibly annoying, and to make it worse, my face betrayed me by turning bright red. I screwed the cap back on the bottle tightly and threw it at him. "Are we going or not?" Chase didn't get mad. He smiled, gripped the steering wheel, and started the car. I felt like he was being cheeky today, just as cheeky as he was before the amnesia. When we got to the hotel suite, Chase took off his shirt right in front of me. Even though I quickly lowered my head, my peripheral vision still caught a glimpse of his perfectly sculpted body. I'd seen him naked countless times when we were kids, but in this context, my cheeks still couldn't help but heat up. Forget it. If he dared to strip in front of me, why shouldn't I look? It's not like I'm losing anything. Once he finished changing, my brain short-circuited and I blurted out, "Why don't you stop staying at the hotel and just move into my place?" Seeing Chase pause, I quickly added, "You bought that apartment for me anyway. It's only right that you move in." Since Chase came back to the States last month, he had been staying in a hotel. I had wanted to bring this up for a while, but I was afraid my intentions would be too obvious, so I swallowed the words every time. Given the current situation, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. A trace of hesitation flashed in Chase's eyes, but eventually, he agreed. After we moved in together, Chase demonstrated exactly what a model modern boyfriend looks like. If I slept in and was rushing in the morning, my toothbrush would be sitting on the sink with the toothpaste already squeezed onto it. Any snack I casually mentioned would appear in the pantry the very next day. For someone who supposedly hadn't been in a relationship, he handled these thoughtful details effortlessly. But the better he treated me, the guiltier I felt. I knew this happiness was just a bubble waiting to burst. When Chase regained his memory, I wouldn't just have to laugh and say, "I was just pranking you." I would have to go back to being just his buddy. All these thoughts and actions that crossed the line would have to be packed away neatly. Since that was the case, I decided to hold on tight to this fleeting joy. Letting myself indulge a little wasn't too much to ask, right? That Saturday, the sequel to my favorite movie came out, and Chase immediately took me to see it. Halfway through the movie, my phone slipped off my lap and slid into the gap between the seats. I bent down to pick it up, Chase turned sideways to help me look for it. I found the phone and was just about to tell him. But when I turned my head, the tip of my nose bumped into his cheek as he leaned in. Our lips crashed together, completely unexpectedly. Chase's pupils dilated slightly, and he pulled back in less than half a second. I kept a straight face. What couple hasn't kissed? We've kissed like 800 times. No need to make a big deal out of it. After saying that, I immediately glued my eyes to the screen. My hands frantically grabbed a huge handful of popcorn and shoved it into my mouth. I didn't even remember to chew slowly. Thankfully, the theater was dark enough that my burning red ears were hidden in the shadows, so I didn't get caught. I have no idea what happened in the rest of the movie. My mind was entirely occupied by the warm sensation of that touch. Even after the movie ended, I still felt flushed and dizzy, so I suggested walking home to get some cool air. As we walked side by side, Chase took my hand. His hand was exceptionally large, easily wrapping around my cold fingers. I wish time could just stop right at that moment. But just then, a voice called out from behind me, "Jasper." The moment I heard my name, I immediately shook off Chase's hand. I felt guilty, like a cat caught stealing cream, and my eyes darted around in panic. A colleague I ran into smiled as she walked up and glanced at Chase. "Jasper, who is this?" Chase nodded slightly and answered politely, "I'm his roommate." I cut him off sharply before he could finish. Chase paused. He didn't argue, but his fingers curled slightly. Although he didn't say anything, for some reason, I felt like he had sensed something. The next day, Chase was out at a business dinner until very late. It was nearly 2 a.m. when he got home. As soon as he walked in, I smelled the strong scent of alcohol. Seeing his unsteady steps, I realized he was drunk. I quickly helped him to the sofa to rest, then turned to the kitchen to make some hangover soup. Just as I finished cooking, Chase appeared in the kitchen. Since he's much taller than me, he easily wrapped me in his arms from behind. Am I embarrassing? He rested his chin on my shoulder, his warm breath brushing past my ear. Do you think I'm not good enough to be seen? I was completely stunned. This guy seemed to have a very skewed perception of himself. If a face like his was embarrassing, then barely anyone in this world could show their face in public. Quickly shook my head, my heart turning into mush. He turned me around by the shoulders to face him. Then he extended his arms, trapping me between his body and the counter. I have a question for you. I clenched my fists, nervous. Did he get his memory back? Did he realize I was lying? Like a criminal waiting to be handcuffed, I stood silently awaiting his judgment. But the next second, he said in a low voice, "Can I kiss you?" Huh? What kind of foul play is that question? His breathing was right there. Drunk Chase had this hazy look in his eyes, full of rogue charm. Who could resist that? I pinched the back of my hand hard. Not a dream. I felt like my heart was about to pound right out of my chest. I didn't know the meaning of restraint. I wanted to tackle him onto the bed right then and there. But if he ever recovered his memory, a situation like this, one that went way beyond expectations, would be impossible to clean up. But with a gorgeous man right in front of me, I couldn't think that far ahead. I closed my eyes and pressed my lips against his first. The kiss was passionate, self-indulgent. Chase quickly took control, lifting me onto the kitchen counter. His hand gently cupped the back of my neck, tightening with just the right amount of force. In the heat of the moment, just as I couldn't help but place my hand on his belt, Chase suddenly opened his eyes, as if snapping awake. He ran away. After that day, Chase seemed to start avoiding me. He left early and came back late every day. Sometimes he even slept at the office. Even though we lived under the same roof, the number of times we saw each other could be counted on one hand. If my lips didn't still feel that distinct swelling, I would have suspected that kiss was just a dream I hallucinated. I wondered if he instinctively felt repulsed that day. Did he suddenly realize he was kissing a man, feel disgusted, and flee? Whether that was the case or not, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait for death. We had finally gotten to this point. Rather than waiting for him to recover his memory and for things to get awkward, I might as well seal the deal now. Even if he broke ties with me after remembering, I would have no regrets in this life. No sooner said than done. I had never been this brave. That night, I deliberately put on one of Chase's button-down shirts as pajamas. The The fabric hung loosely on my body, barely, covering the top of my thighs. Below that, absolutely nothing. When Chase came back, it was already past midnight, and his assistant was following him in. Hearing the door open, I immediately threw myself at Chase. "You're back." Chase caught me, of course, and turned his body slightly to block his assistant's view. "I'll give you the documents tomorrow. You can head back now." As soon as the assistant left, Chase peeled me off him. His gaze lingered on me for only half a second before looking away. He raised his hand to turn up the thermostat a couple of degrees, then asked me, "Where are your clothes?" I blinked my eyes innocently and recited the excuse I had prepared. "My pajamas aren't dry yet, so I borrowed yours." But the pants were too big, they wouldn't stay up. I dragged him to drink with me, claiming I was celebrating a promotion at work. I'm a lightweight. One glass in and I was already dizzy. Using the alcohol as courage, I started acting reckless. Holding a wine glass in one hand, I draped my other arm around his neck. I sat in his lap, my body completely limp against his. I did such a good job at work. Don't I get a reward? Chase didn't seem to expect my move. His expression faltered slightly. "What do you want?" I hooked the corner of my lips and whispered something in his ear. Chase's expression didn't change, but his slightly red ears betrayed him. I pretended to slip and spilled the wine on him. The burgundy liquid instantly soaked his white shirt, outlining the faint lines of his abs, making my blood rush. "Oops, sorry." After a totally insincere apology, I grabbed a handkerchief and leaned in. My wiping motions looked hasty, but I was intentionally letting my hand linger over his chest. Chase's breath hitched, and I could feel his body tense up slightly. Emboldened, I placed my hand on his thigh and then slid it upwards along the fabric, with a hint of barely there provocation. As long as I proved he didn't resist me, I could comfortably try to make him slowly fall for me. But the next second, he abruptly grabbed my wrist, stopping my dangerous movement. "It's late. Go to sleep." Leaving those words behind, he got up and walked into the bathroom. He didn't come out for a long time. "So it really won't work, huh?" I couldn't lie to myself anymore. All the air went out of me. Chase simply doesn't like men, and he definitely doesn't like me. I forced him into the role of boyfriend. That wasn't fair to him. At that moment, my guilt reached its peak. I tossed and turned all night. Early the next morning, after Chase went to work, I went to the hospital alone. I needed to confirm beforehand if a sudden shock would have any negative effects on Chase's recovery, because I had decided to confess everything to him. Making this decision wasn't easy. I had even packed my luggage in advance. After I confessed today, I would move out and never interact with Chase again. After all, I was the one with bad intentions. I should bear the consequences myself. But after hearing me out, the doctor looked confused. He told me there were no after effects. Chase's memory had already returned the day after the accident, which meant that for this whole time, the man dating and kissing me was Chase with his full memory intact. Took me a long time to accept this reality. I sat there in a daze for ages. Since Chase already knew I was lying, why didn't he expose me? Why play along? In a flash, an absurd, unbelievable guess crossed my mind. Chase had always been lucky with romance. In high school, the wealthy, beautiful prom queen secretly put breakfast in Chase's desk every day. Surprisingly, Chase didn't refuse it. When she held her birthday party, Chase, who usually hated those events, actually accepted the invitation. Even for the school's overnight camping trip, Chase agreed to be on her team. Everyone said the feelings were mutual and they were definitely going to happen. That day, I climbed to the mountain peak and saw Chase and the prom queen standing by the railing, chatting. Honestly, standing together, handsome guy, beautiful girl, they were easy on the eyes. But my heart felt like it was being twisted into a knot. I didn't have the heart to listen to what they were saying, so I turned around and went back down the mountain. When I snapped out of it, I realized I had no idea where I was. I tried to use my phone to contact a teacher or classmate, but it was remote out there. There was absolutely no signal. I pulled out a paper map and flipped it over and over, but I have zero sense of direction. I couldn't even tell where I was, let alone find a path using a map. I had no choice but to brace myself and keep walking. Whenever I hit a fork in the road, I'd just play eeny, meeny, miny, mo and pick one. The sky gradually darkened. I hadn't run into a single classmate. I started to panic. But even in that situation, my mind was still filled with the scene of Chase and the girl on the mountaintop. I was hopeless. Because I couldn't see the path clearly, I tripped over a rock and tumbled down a slope. Luckily, there was a protruding flat area halfway down, stopping me from rolling all the way to the bottom of the cliff. But I just moved slightly, and my leg hurt like hell. Blood was gushing from the wound, and I couldn't move at all. I shouted loudly for 10 minutes until my voice was hoarse. But the only response was the wind and the occasional cry of some unknown animal. Just as I was thinking about using a stone to carve my last will and testament, I suddenly heard someone calling my name. The voice was far away, but it sounded urgent and panicked. I immediately lifted my head and screamed like a maniac, "I'm here." The moment I saw Chase, all the grievances I had been holding back couldn't be hidden anymore. They came flooding out. Seeing me like that, Chase assumed I couldn't handle the pain. He simply dressed my wound, then immediately bent down to carry me on his back, rushing down the mountain. Leaning on Chase's back, I felt an inexplicable sense of safety. But thinking that Chase might carry someone else like this in the future, maybe he had already carried that girl, I couldn't help but feel bitter. "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be with your girlfriend?" My tone was so sour you could pickle cucumbers in it. Chase tilted his head slightly, asking in confusion, "What?" Luckily, Chase couldn't see my expression. He could only hear the teasing tone I was trying so hard to fake. "Are we bros or not? Keeping secrets from me? Aren't you dating?" Chase's footsteps paused for half a second. Then he answered quickly, "Not happening. Is that why you've been acting weird with me lately?" I reacted defensively, denying it immediately. "Of course not." My voice was so loud it almost echoed. After a while, I couldn't help but ask, "Then why did you accept her breakfast? Why go to her birthday party? And this time, why agree to team up with her for the hike and give her a gift?" After saying it, I felt I had no right to question him like that. So I quickly added, "With you acting like that, how am I supposed to give her my love letter?" Chase froze. Took him a long while to speak. "You like her?" Lying on Chase's back, I gritted my teeth and said, "She's beautiful, kind, and has a great personality. Who wouldn't like her?" Chase was silent for a moment before reminding me, "Jasper, your most important job right now is studying. Your ranking dropped over 20 places on this last test." I pouted. The nerve of this guy to lecture me. He's the one flaunting that face all day, flirting around. One person confessing here, another delivering a love letter there. The crisis alarm was blaring in my head. How could I possibly focus on studying? But seizing the opportunity, I had a sudden idea. "Then let's make a pact. Neither of us dates in high school. Deal?" Chase gave a quiet MHM, then suddenly said, "I thought you were the one putting the breakfast in my desk." I frowned and blurted out, "Please, if I were buying you breakfast, why would I choose crab soup dumplings? You hate that smell." Chase turned his face toward me. "How did you know those were in there? Did you look? Why would I snoop through your stuff?" I guessed, "Okay." I was blushing furiously, so I quickly patted his shoulder. "Don't change the subject. How do you explain the birthday party? You're not the type to go to those things." And giving her a gift, I saw it with my own eyes. Chase carried me steadily as he explained seriously. The gift was a polite return for the breakfasts I accepted. I turned her down today. As for the birthday party, didn't she invite you too? I thought you'd definitely go join the fun. I only left early when I realized you weren't there. For some reason, my mood suddenly brightened. My leg didn't seem to hurt as much. I pursed my lips and mumbled, "Who told you not to ask me first?" Chase chuckled lightly, his tone carrying a hint of helplessness. "You've been giving me the cold shoulder for days. You detour whenever you see me, and you blocked my number. How was I supposed to ask?" After that, although Chase was still popular, he never had any rumored girlfriends again. Even when he was studying abroad, Chase video called me every day as soon as he was done with work. There was absolutely no possibility of him dating anyone. So I didn't know what Chase looked like when he liked someone. But what if that person was me? I immediately pulled out my phone and searched online. How to tell if someone likes you. The summary was, they are willing to spend time and money on you, and willing to put effort into making you happy. I immediately went out and bought a ridiculously difficult Lego set. When building it in front of Chase, I complained about my hand cramping 1 minute and the instructions making me dizzy the next. After deliberately placing a few pieces wrong, I pretended to get mad, acting like I was fighting with myself. My acting was so real I even squeezed out a tear. Seeing this, Chase quickly came over to patiently help me fix the mistakes. For the entire next week, he stayed up with me until the early morning hours every night to build it. I only found out later that he had a pile of unfinished work at the time. Every time, he waited until I got tired and fell asleep before going to his study to work until dawn. Thinking back now, I realized that growing up, he always seemed to put me first. I was just so used to it that I never paid much attention. Seeing the dark circles under Chase's eyes getting worse, I felt a little bad. So that night, I pretended to fall asleep early, wanting him to go handle his own business. But after Chase carried me back to my room, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he sat by the bed and stared at me for a long time. Just as I was confused, I suddenly felt a warm touch on my forehead. He kissed my forehead. My heart jolted, but I could only keep my eyes closed and not dare to move a muscle. The kiss was brief. After Chase left, I opened my eyes and sat up instantly. If the impulse from the other day could be explained by alcohol, what about this time? I covered my burning cheeks with both hands, my heart pounding chaotically. I didn't need any more proof. I think I already knew the answer. On Valentine's Day, Chase and I went to the supermarket and bought a ton of ingredients, planning to cook a dinner together at home. While we were busy in the kitchen, my phone suddenly buzzed. A female colleague, Sarah, had sent me a voice message. I tapped it without thinking, and the audio played out loud on speaker. "Jasper, thanks so much for today. I wanted to thank you in person. Do you want to grab dinner tonight?" A dinner date on Valentine's Day. Any adult could hear the hidden meaning. I glanced sideways, observing Chase's reaction. He should be jealous, right? I felt strangely excited. I had already typed out a rejection in the chat box, but I deliberately asked Chase in a cheeky tone, "Do you think I should go?" I was fantasizing about Chase getting wildly jealous and pinning me to the bed to punish me. The grin on my face was impossible to suppress. But the next second, Chase answered, "Up to you." I froze, the smile stiffening on my face. What the hell? Is this how playing hard to get works? But we agreed to cook together and we bought all this food. It wouldn't be right if I just left, would it? Chase placed a carrot on the cutting board and chopped it efficiently. "It doesn't matter. I can eat by myself tonight. The leftover ingredients can go in the fridge. They won't go to waste." Is this about wasting food? Dissatisfied with his answer, I frowned slightly. "Then I'm going? I'm serious." Chase didn't stop chopping, nor did he look up at me. He just gave a simple MHM. I got a little angry. At first, I was just bluffing. But now, I actually walked to the entryway and put my shoes on. Just then, Chase called out to me, dried his hands and walked toward me. I smirked. I knew he wouldn't be able to hold back from stopping me. But Chase just took a brown coat from the rack and draped it over my shoulders. "It's cold out. Wear an extra layer so you don't catch a cold." My face fell. I slammed the door and left. The streets on Valentine's Day were full of couples, the air thick with romance. I should have been at home enjoying the holiday vibe with Chase. Instead, here I was, sitting alone in a park pavilion, suffering in the wind. Looks like I overthought it. Chase recovering his memory and playing along wasn't love. Maybe he was just joking around. He didn't like me at all. I had imagined the whole thing. Suddenly, I didn't know how to face him. So I just booked a king bedroom at a 5-star hotel, planning to sleep until the world ended and clear my head. When I woke up tomorrow, I would try to let go of my feelings for Chase. I'd go back to just being his best bro. It had rained heavily at sunset. As I was booking the room, a drop of water from the pavilion roof splashed right onto my phone screen. Before I could react, the password-less payment went through. But the payment account was Chase's. Back in college, there was a time I ate nothing but pickles and buns to save money for a pair of limited edition sneakers. When Chase found out, he forcefully set up a family pay link for me. And he has this weird quirk. The more I spend his money, the happier he gets. Staring at the payment successful screen, my finger hovered over the refund button for a moment. Eventually, I decided that was too melodramatic and gave up. After arriving at the hotel, I conscientiously texted Chase to tell him I was staying out and not to wait up. Then I tossed my phone aside and buried my head in the pillow. I opened my eyes again to the sound of frantic ringing. But just as I went to answer, the ringing stopped, and the call disconnected. I checked my phone and saw over 20 missed calls. All from Chase. Just as I was about to call back to ask if it was an emergency, there was a knock on the hotel room door. I opened it, and the man outside immediately pulled me into a hug. He held me tight. I was stunned. "Why are you here?" Chase said, his voice muffled. "I got the text alert. I saw you booked a room." I realized what happened and my eyes widened. Wait, did he come to catch me cheating? I pushed him away and put on a serious face. "I have 2 questions for you. Please answer me honestly." Chase seemed to know what I was going to say. He tilted his head slightly, avoiding eye contact. But he still responded, "Okay." I looked straight at him. "You recovered your memory a long time ago, didn't you?" Chase's expression didn't change, but his Adam's apple bobbed. After a long silence, he lowered his eyes, his voice raspy. "You found out." He admitted it. "Good." I nodded slightly, and the next second, I asked bluntly, "You like me, don't you?" Chase fell silent. I crossed my arms and continued. "What does the silence mean? Is it that hard to answer? All these days, were you serious about me, or were you just playing around? If it's the latter, we don't need to beat around the bush. Let's just make a clean break. We never have to see each other again." Chase was always calm and composed. It was the first time I'd seen him look so lost. He shook his head and spoke quickly. "Of course I'm serious. Then why are you hot and cold with me?" I stepped closer, backing him into the corner. I grabbed his wrist and held it up to his face. The cut on his finger was fresh, still red. It hurt just looking at it. I knew exactly what happened. He cut himself last night when he heard I was going to accept Sarah's invitation. "You kissed me, then avoided me. You were clearly jealous, but pretended not to care. You're full of contradictions, you know that? Chase, what exactly are you afraid of?" Chase took a deep breath and lowered his head as if accepting his fate. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he suddenly asked, "Do you remember Luke?" "Luke?" I thought for a long time before finding the name in my memory. He was a former neighbor of Chase's, a senior in the school next to ours. He had good grades and was really kind. I met him a few times when he came to Chase's house to study. I didn't know why he brought him up, so I said, "I remember." "Why?" Chase closed his eyes. "On the day he got his college acceptance letter, he committed suicide." Hearing this, I covered my mouth in shock. Someone so gentle and cheerful. How could he? Chase told me that Luke had a secret crush on a boy. His parents accidentally saw his diary and found out. His parents were traditional. They decided their son was sick. They forced him to take weird medications and made him look at pictures of girls. But how can you change someone's orientation that easily? When the parents saw the medicine wasn't working, they contacted the other boy's parents, insisting their son had been corrupted. They even went to the school to demand how. The teachers were educating the students. The incident blew up. The whole grade, maybe the whole school, knew about it. Although only a few people swore at him to his face, he couldn't escape the isolation, the exclusion, the pointing fingers. Invisible malice is the deadliest kind. Under that immense pressure, Luke slowly became withdrawn. He bombed his college entrance exams, and his mental health shattered. The day the acceptance letter came, Luke said he was going to the beach to clear his head. He never came back. It wasn't until the search team found his body that his parents finally woke up. But it was too late. When recounting the story, Chase's tone was calm, but I could feel the sorrow in his voice. He looked at me and said earnestly, "This road is hard. I didn't want you to suffer any harm or trouble." Hearing this, I understood completely. No wonder Chase suddenly chose to study abroad. No wonder his attitude toward me these past few days was so conflicted. "Do you think that by telling me this, I can pretend nothing happened and go back to being your bro?" I hugged him, burying my face in the crook of his neck, and said seriously, "As long as you're by my side, I'm not afraid of anything." Chase's eyelashes trembled. He hugged me back tightly and didn't let go for a long time. Since we cleared the air, Chase has become increasingly clingy. We'd go to sleep on our own sides of the bed, but I'd wake up holding hands. When watching TV, he insists on sitting right up against me, arm around my waist, turning every so often to kiss my earlobe. Even when I shower, he tries to come in and join me. Every time, I end up a messy wreck, while he looks energized and refreshed. It's peak travel season, and my feed is full of travel recommendations. I know it's all marketing algorithms, but the more I looked, the more tempted I was to go somewhere. Once, I wanted to bring it up to Chase, but the words were on the tip of my tongue when he got a call for an emergency meeting and rushed off. I looked at the itinerary I had carefully organized, thought about it, and silently put it away. Chase really was busy. For the next few days, he left early and came back late. Even when he was home, he was in video conferences until 2 a.m. But a week later, late at night, Chase suddenly told me the tickets were booked and told me to pack my bags. I didn't react immediately and asked him blankly what we were doing. He smiled and said he had finished all the project work ahead of schedule to clear a full week just to travel with me. I was so moved my eyes got hot. I couldn't help but joke, asking if he'd been reading some How to Be a Boyfriend guide. Early the next morning, we set off, officially starting our long-awaited trip. Under the sunlight, we walked tightly hand in hand down the street. I know the future will have its difficulties, but as long as our hearts are close, that's enough.